What's going on, Surf and Turf? 2015 champion here, Frankie Martinez. And, Monday morning, sitting here enjoying a cup of coffee. Just got back from a nice weekend trip from Las Vegas for week one of the NFL. And, as I'm sitting here sipping on my coffee, I'm browsing through the fantasy pages, checking scores, and I come across this video posted by Beak on Saturday in regards to, his response to me, talking about his sleeper and fantasy bust for the year. And, upon watching that video, kind of made me laugh a little bit, thought it was a little humorous. And I really wanted to kind of recap what a sleeper is, kind of discuss, Beak's picks for sleepers for the year, and then ultimately, give you guys a couple options on how I looked at sleepers. And I know it's a day late, but I thought it was important to address, his video and then kind of give you guys some options that are realistic sleepers. So let's get to it. Let's talk about, Beak's video and his sleeper selections for 2016. So before I talk about his selections, I wanted to kind of give you guys, a definition of a sleeper here. So a sleeper, typically a late round pick or waiver wire selection who exceeds his statistical expectations and becomes a prominent option in fantasy leagues. A sleeper can be a rookie or a player who has yet to live up to his potential. 30-year wide receiver is often a good candidate to be sleepers because many take a couple of years to develop. And that's just a definition I found online with some, a fantasy glossary. And, I kind of believe in what it's saying there. And then I looked at, Beak's sleeper picks for the year. And so let's talk about them. Number one, Jeremy Hill, starting running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, owned in 96.8% of fantasy leagues. If you were fortunate, you were probably able to draft him within the first 4 rounds. I don't know if that necessarily classifies as a sleeper. Yeah, he's going a couple rounds later than he did last year, but ultimately top 4 rounds, owned in over 95% of leagues. Wouldn't classify him as a sleeper, but again, good player to have on your team, just definitely not sleeper quality. Number 2, Demaryius Thomas. Sleeper, guys, watch out. Don't miss this guy. Owned in 99.3% of fantasy leagues. If you were fortunate, again, you got him within the first 4 rounds of your fantasy draft. So definitely a good player. Not a sleeper. Yeah, he's got a new quarterback throwing to him, but he had a great season last year. He's going to continue to produce numbers regardless of who's throwing him the ball. So I don't know how you would classify him as a sleeper, and definitely not a guy you're going to be able to get, in the late rounds of any draft whatsoever. And then the highlight of his sleeper picks, none other than Mr. Andrew Luck, owned in 99.4% of fantasy leagues. Now with Andrew, you were very fortunate if you were able to draft him within the first 3 rounds of your fantasy league. And yeah, he was out with injury last year, and he ended up not putting the numbers up that everyone thought that he would as the consensus number 1 quarterback last year. But ultimately, the guy's not a sleeper. You weren't going to get him outside of the top 3 rounds of any fantasy draft. And when you look at these 3 players, guys, I don't know how you'd classify any of them as sleepers. Yeah, they could be, bounce back candidates after, rough years last year. But let's be honest, guys, when you talk about a sleeper, it's a late round to waiver wire selection. And none of these guys were available in late rounds. So I know you went out on a limb there, Beak, picking these sleepers for the 2016 fantasy season. My hat's off to you. You went deep with these guys, and ultimately, if you picked them up in the first 4 rounds, then you got your sleepers. Derrick Henry, your 4th sleeper pick, I'll give you credit on that one. Definitely could be considered a sleeper. So, I guess 1 out of 4 isn't bad, but next year when you make a video, you might want to really understand what makes a sleeper. So for me, I know that the season's already started, so it's kind of not common to talk about sleepers and busts after the kickoff of the season. So I wanted to focus some attention on some guys that I did draft on my team. So they're on one of my teams somewhere. And if you guys have these players on any of your fantasy teams, I think you drafted well, and I think that you're going to reap the benefits of these players in 2016. So, Mike Wallace, receiver in Baltimore. Again, Joe Flacco, deep ball quarterback. Mike Wallace has tons of speed. That's what they're going to depend on him for. So I definitely think he's going to provide you with a fantasy spark, especially during bye weeks. Will Fuller, wide receiver for the Houston Texans. Again, rookie with a lot of potential. That offense is looking for some big play wide receivers aside from DeAndre Hopkins. And again, that's going to allow him to get a lot of one-on-one coverage and some mismatches. And I think he's going to reap the benefits of that offense. And if you have him on any of your teams, hats off to you. Third sleeper pick, Tajay Sharp. Wide receiver, when you're looking at him, again, another rookie with a lot of potential for a team that's in need of some wide receiver help. Ultimately, if you're able to pick this guy up in the later rounds, I think you're going to reap the benefits during bye weeks, and ultimately, I think he shows a lot of promise long term. Last but not least, I'm still a big fan of DeAndre Washington, running back for the Oakland Raiders. Again, I know no surprise, Frankie has a Raider as a sleeper pick, but ultimately, I think the guy has a lot of potential as a receiver out of the backfield. I think as the season progresses, he will solidify himself as the number 2 running back, and I think ultimately, long term, he's definitely a guy that if you have him deep on your bench, you're going to reap the benefits when he's called upon on your fantasy team. So those are my sleeper picks. I definitely think that you can classify those guys as sleepers. Beak, thanks for the video. Thanks for helping me out with some guys I need to pick in the top 4 rounds. But for all of us here that are looking for those, waiver wire pickups or those late round guys that are going to produce on your team, I think I provided you with 4 quality players. And last but not least, I only have one bust that I want to talk about. And I know the season's already started and he had an off first game, but I feel confident talking about him as a bust because it's someone that I talked to Deke about before the draft. And that would be Devontae Freeman, your running back for the Atlanta Falcons. Hate the guy, think he's going to have an awful season. And you can quote me on that. And I think he definitely helped my cause by his fantastic week 1 performance. So if you have him on any of your fantasy teams, I feel for you. Thanks, guys. Have a good week. Talk to you soon. Bye.